For this vlog today, I'll be discussing how interactive media has evolved from the early 90s to now. For intents and purposes of this video, I will be discussing video games, as I feel like they are the best form of interactive media and have shown the massive improvement from analog to digital. And the first thing I shall be covering is what is the difference between analog and digital. Analog was obviously a very old system. It consists of stuff as cassette tapes, VHSs and cartridges. They were very expensive and they could not hold up to a lot of data. If I remember correctly, they broke very easily as well. They were not a very reliable system. There was a lot of complications with them. And obviously with the media evolving through technology, eventually we got onto disc-based. And disc-based products were much better, they were much more superior, they were easier to work with, and most importantly for companies, they were cheaper to work with. For early video games, you used to have a thing called cartridge which holds the game's data. And the problem is with cartridges, they broke very easily, and once they got dust in them, they could break very fast, and they were expensive. They could not hold up to a lot of data on them, so the media, through evolving technology, had to progress if the gaming industry was to stay alive. In the 90s, we had two major consoles released by two major companies. Nintendo released the Nintendo 64, which revolutionised from pixel gaming, where it was little 2D characters, to 3D sprites, where you could have evolved worlds and massive playgrounds to play in a 3D environment. But the problem is with the Nintendo 64 is it was cartridge based. A couple years later, a console that would revolutionise gaming till this very date was the PlayStation 1. But the PlayStation 1 used CD based games, so it had discs, and the PlayStation 1 could play normal DVDs as well as games. A lot of companies wanted to move to the disc as it was a much better format. You could have bigger games than the Nintendo 64. But a lot of companies were worried that the PlayStation would flop, but thankfully it didn't. There was one company called Squaresoft at the time where they were creating a game called Final Fantasy VII, and up to this point they exclusively worked with Nintendo. But when the Nintendo 64 was released, and then the PlayStation a couple years later, they had the choice of making Final Fantasy VII on the Nintendo 64, but it would be 17 cartridges for the whole game. Or they could go onto the PlayStation 1, where it would just be 3 simple discs. You can see why that the media evolved and wanted to move to disc-based consoles. Jumping forward now from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 2 again made a massive leap in technology, as the PlayStation 2 allowed bigger file games, better graphics, and more importantly, better power on the console. You could now, instead of just experiencing this little 3D pixeled world, you could have detailed landscapes. There was one game called Metal Gear Solid, and this game had evolved from the early days of gaming to the PlayStation 2 and now even on the PlayStation 4. The game evolved in such a massive way. On the PlayStation 1, the characters' faces were very pixelated and you couldn't see them, but the world was quite big and had lots of little details in it. But thanks to the PlayStation 2, the advancement in technology in just a couple years allowed this Metal Gear Solid game to have fully faced characters, better audio, and a complex and intriguing world to sneak around in. In this game, in Metal Gear Solid 3, you could see animals interacting with other animals. You could see crocodiles eating rabbits and so on. And this allowed the gaming industry, again, to evolve in a huge way. Eventually, the Xbox came out, the original Xbox, and with the Xbox coming out, Microsoft, the company of Xbox, introduced a feature which would push the gaming industry extremely far. It was amazing. They released online play on consoles. PC already had this feature, but to play online with a console with your friends on some games was a huge deal to a lot of people, and PlayStation capitalised on this idea by, again, making PlayStations accessible with internet access. So now your console just wasn't for you to enjoy, it was for you to play online with everyone around the world. Years later, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 are released, and this set the standard for console gaming. It had built-in, the PlayStation 3 had built-in internet connection, so you could just connect to the internet. You could start adding people online. You could chat to people. You could do lots and lots of things. You could interact more, and this pushed interactive media to new highs. You got games where now they were becoming more cinematic. A lot of games are like watching films. There was one game called Beyond Two Souls where it was created with a film director, a famous one, and a game director, where they came together and they created a product where you were effectively playing the film. And years go by with the PlayStation and the Xbox 360, and then again, with games changing at a very rapid pace, the media evolved with stuff like face technology. So what that means is, instead of just having a voice actor say the lines, you had cameras that would capture the actor's face, their movements, and everything they'd done, and they could put that into games now, which was a huge leap. And it didn't just make voice actors, it made them actual actors. Instead of just sitting there with a script and saying it, they now had to act it out. They had to show the movement. Again, this is digital media moving at an incredibly fast rate. Thanks to stuff like computers advancing. Without this, we wouldn't have this technology. The PlayStation and the Xbox 360s are compared to computers now because they allow you to go on websites like Google, they allow you to stream films like through Netflix, and it has created thousands of jobs. YouTube has also helped the gaming industry move forward as well, due to the fact that YouTubers, or just ordinary people like me and you, can sit there, set up a camera and play a game. And now a lot of these people that have got famous for sitting there playing games are now helping companies with their products, again, evolve the market. YouTube is interlinked with all types of media. Without YouTube, I believe that the media won't advance as far as it would have without YouTube. Because thanks to YouTube, we can get stuff like, we can watch movie trailers anywhere, we can see gameplay whenever we want, and through this, as long as you have an internet connection, obviously, and through this, it just allows the market to be so widespread that people in different countries can experience stuff that's exclusive to our country. In Japan, they have a lot of exclusive films like the Godzilla films, and they have a lot of exclusive games which never get released over here in the UK. But a lot of people can now still see those games thanks to people on platforms like YouTube, or just through the internet in general.
Go. Sit down, you fucker. Digital interactive media falls under certain categories. These are short films, promotional material, film trailers, virtual reality tours, games and e-learning products. Short films are made by primarily indie studios, people that are trying to get started out in the filmmaking world. And primarily they aim for a very certain audience. They usually aim for audience that fall under the reformer category, as usually the films are high energy and about free spirits. A lot of these films, again, are aimed towards younger people that fall under the E category on the socioeconomic scales, as again the films are about freedom and people without jobs. Promotional material and advertising, depending on the area you live, will depend on who it's aimed at. Promotional material and advertising can be multiple things. This can be from McDonald's advertising a new menu, or could be Nike advertising a new style that they have in this season. Depending on who you are will depend on what would please the audience and what they would want to buy. This will have an impact on their social lives, as someone who goes to Nike will usually associate with people that are into the same sort of clothing as them. Depending on the type of film trailers are usually aimed towards certain audiences. Films such as The Avengers or any Disney film are usually aimed towards mainstreamers, as they are big products and are well known. Whereas films like Scott Pilgrim are aimed towards a more reformer crowd, as it is about individualism and freedom. Film trailers are obviously to show off product and the release date and to get people hyped for the film to go and see it. Virtual reality tours. Virtual reality tours are used to experience something. These can be anything from video games to even architects seeing how a building could look afterwards. Primarily, virtual reality tours are used by a big product called the Oculus Rift. They are very expensive and you don't see them very often, as they are very expensive. Games have multiple audiences. Like films, depending on the game will depend who the film is aimed at. Games have their own audience. They have casual gamers, which are usually mobile gaming, stuff as Candy Crush. They have more hardcore gaming, which is stuff like Overwatch, where you have competitions in them and you play more competitively, and so on. E-learning platforms are used primarily in school, as they are a good product for school students to use. They are used for young children, such as MyMaths, to get their understanding of the subject better without having the use of physical products. E-learning is a very good platform for school students.
With the evolution of the digital media, there's been a lot of ethical problems with the fact now that you can get stuff online. And the problem is, a lot of people pirate these products, and a lot of these products end up on websites like YouTube. But thankfully, there's a way to combat these. YouTube has a copyright system in place where if they notice that you used a clip from another product, that they take down the video and notify you that a copyright claimant has claimed the video, as it is not yours and may not fall under fair use. You can dispute it, obviously, if you feel like there is some fair use in there, if you're doing a parody or you're criticising the products. A lot of people, particularly major companies, do not like Netflix, as Netflix is a risk to these companies, as more and more people rather just sit at home and watch a couple of films on Netflix than pay the prices of a cinema ticket and go and see the new blockbuster film. So a lot of these companies seem to think a lot of their films are failures, but they blame websites such as Netflix and YouTube as they think it's killing Hollywood. There is obviously evidence to support this, but there is no real way that Hollywood can stop YouTube or Netflix. So instead, what they've done is they've embraced the fact that more and more people are moving on to these medias. So what they've done is they've created YouTube channels now where you can watch some of their older films, and sometimes I have seen where you've seen a newer film on YouTube, but you obviously have to pay for them. And now on YouTube you have a lot of channels that allow you to watch trailers, that allow you to watch clips from the film, and they're starting to put more and more interviews on YouTube as more and more people will see it on YouTube. Netflix is a little different, though, because Netflix needs to get the rights to place the videos on their system. And a lot of major companies have stated they don't want to put it on Netflix, but they end up putting a lot of their films on Netflix, ironically. And it helps, stuff like this helps downloading laws, as it keeps the internet regulated, and it allows companies to still make their money and their profits. But unfortunately, with websites like YouTube and Netflix, you do need a good broadband, and you need decent internet for it, and not everyone has that. I know personally, my girlfriend, she's with BT, and her internet really struggles with going on Netflix and streaming these products. And unfortunately, you have to watch the products at a very low quality. But obviously, a lot of people don't like to watch their products at low quality, as it affects their viewing. And it same goes for YouTube, because they condense the video when they sense that the internet's not strong enough to stream the videos. So there's a lot of problems behind that. That's one major problem I find with websites like YouTube and Netflix, is you need to have a good internet connection. And thankfully they are getting better with this, where even though the picture quality might not be great, it's still decent. They're trying to make it so if you don't have great internet, you'll still get a decent image, but it might be a bit pixelated in places. And same goes for YouTube. Also with the internet, you're always downloading when you're on the internet, you are always downloading information. You're always downloading stuff. So you may not realise, but when you're streaming a film on Netflix, you're actually progressively downloading the film, not onto the system, but megabyte by megabyte, you're streaming it onto your internet, and your internet's downloading that information to show you the product. Again, same with YouTube, Twitch, and all of these other websites that allow you to watch these products, unless you physically download it. With downloading, the problem is with downloading, there is a lot of compression to it. One example we were talking about in class the other day was the old records that they used to have. It's the raw sound, so it sounds much better than a download does, because an MP3 file condenses everything down so it fits on an MP3, whereas a record is just the raw sound. It was how it sounded when it was being recorded. And there's a lot of issues with this. I personally don't have a problem with this because I like to use stuff as like Spotify, which is a streaming music site which is very similar to Netflix. And I don't have a problem with a little bit of compression as long as I get the product and I think it's up to a high enough standard. And I know a lot of people do have products and they moan saying, "Oh, I wish it sounded better or it looked better," but I feel like I'm happy with what I've received. I'm happy that I've received the product, and as long as I enjoy it, obviously, then I don't mind the quality. Understand the fact things have to be compressed if you are going to download it. I'd like to talk about what is digital interactive media used for. Digital interactive media is used for multiple things. My best example for this, I'll still say video games, because video games, it doesn't get any more interactive than that. You're not just watching the experience, you're actually controlling what is happening, and you control the outcome. So if you're playing a shooting game, you have the choice. You always have the freedom of choice of what you're going to do next. Granted, not all games have this freedom of choice. A lot of games might just set you on a very linear path where you have to walk forward or you have to read something, but you're still controlling how long it takes for you to get from point A to point B.